It was an ordinary evening when the unexpected happened. I had just gotten out of the shower, the steam still lingering in the air, when I heard it, her voice. Sarah, my wife, was on the phone in the other room, and what she said hit me like a punch to the gut. My ex is better than him in bed and other things. I settled for less. Those words stopped me dead in my tracks. I stood there in shock, the towel wrapped around me, unable to move. I didn't even think I was breathing. The words hung in the air. She wasn't joking. She wasn't being sarcastic. She had said it with the kind of ease that comes with a secret she's been holding on to for a long time. But it wasn't just what she said, it was who she said it to. I didn't know who was on the other end of the phone, but I didn't need to. I didn't need to know their name or face to understand the meaning behind those words. She had settled for me. Me, the man she had promised to love, to cherish. I stood frozen, the sound of her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. The house, the life we built, it all felt like it was falling apart in front of me. But I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. And then I heard the doorbell. It rang sharply, and Sarah immediately got up. I heard her footsteps as she made her way to the front door. She didn't notice me standing there, still processing what I had just overheard. She opened the door with a smile that I didn't recognize. It was the same smile she gave me when I came home after a long day. But now, standing there in the hallway, I knew it wasn't for me. The man she had been talking to, he was here. I didn't need to see him. I didn't need to know his name. I could tell just by the way she reacted that he was the reason I was hearing what I just had. He was the one she had been seeing behind my back. She greeted him with warmth, her voice light and flirtatious. I could hear the laughter between them, the kind of laughter that had been missing between us for months. That was the moment everything clicked. All the signs I had ignored, all the small, strange behaviors, her late nights, the random phone calls, suddenly made sense. She had been lying to me all this time. But it wasn't just the affair that stung. It was the way she talked about me. Settled for less. She had chosen him. Chosen to give him whatever I couldn't give her. I wasn't good enough. I was the man she had been stuck with, the one she could rely on for the mundane things, the boring things. But he was the one who had her heart, or at least the part of it that mattered. I stood there, my mind racing. What should I do now? Should I confront her? Should I call her out? Or should I just walk away like she had been walking away from me for months? The anger was there, but so was something else. A deep emptiness. I didn't need to hear more. I didn't need to know what they were doing, how far it had gone. The truth was already clear. As I heard Sarah laughing again, this time at something he had said, I realized there was no going back. Nothing could fix this. She had already made her choice. The laughter from the other room echoed through the house. Every sound felt like a slap in the face, each chuckle, each word exchanged between them, driving a knife deeper into the wound I didn't know I had. Sarah had always been so careful. At least I thought she was. She had always been the perfect wife to the outside world. The caring, loving partner who smiled through every social event, every family gathering. But now, as I stood in the hallway, listening to her laugh with him, the truth was undeniable. She had been pretending. To me, to everyone. The silence between us after that brief moment in the bathroom felt like an eternity. The doorbell had rung, and as she opened it, I felt the last ounce of control slip from my hands. The last shred of what I had known was now out of my grasp. I wasn't the man she wanted. I wasn't even the man she respected. And as they spoke in the other room, I realized just how far I had fallen in her eyes. They were talking casually now, and every word felt like a betrayal. I could hear the way she spoke to him. Light, playful, and seductive. There was no tension in her voice, no guilt. She had no shame. And for the first time in years, I felt the coldness of her indifference to me. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't stand there in the shadows, quietly suffocating in the reality of it all. I had to know more. I had to confront her, no matter how badly I didn't want to hear the lies that I knew would come. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to move. Every step felt like it took me further away from the life I thought I had. My heart raced, but there was no turning back now. I walked to the living room, where I knew Sarah and her, whoever he was, were. I could hear their conversation, but it was muffled. My feet moved faster, and the closer I got, the more everything became clear. The space between us seemed to grow, like a wall I had no idea how to break. I stepped into the living room, and there she was. She looked up at me, her face lighting up in that fake smile, the one she had perfected for years. "Oh, hey, you're out of the shower," she said, her tone breezy, like nothing was wrong. But I wasn't fooled. The man sitting across from her, leaning back in the armchair with a smirk on his face, made my blood run cold. He looked too comfortable, too confident, like he belonged there. I stared at him for a moment, then turned my gaze to Sarah. She froze, her eyes widening just slightly. The mask she had been wearing slipped for a fraction of a second, but that was enough. I knew everything. "Who is he, Sarah?" I asked, my voice low but steady. She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough for me to see the panic in her eyes. I could feel the tension rise in the room, the quiet before the storm. The man beside her shifted in his seat, his expression turning into something more defensive. He was the one who had been receiving all the affection, all the praise. He was the one who had been taking what was mine, and for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to say anything to him. My anger was focused on her. She was the one who had lied. She was the one who had betrayed me. "James, this is none of your business," Sarah replied, her voice high-pitched, trying to sound calm, but failing miserably. She didn't even address the question. Instead, she turned her back to me, as if that somehow made it okay. "None of my business?" I repeated, louder this time, unable to control the frustration building up inside me. "This is my house, Sarah. I have every right to know who's sitting in it. And I have every right to know why you've been lying to me. Why you've been sneaking around behind my back." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she shot a glance at the man beside her, and I could see her looking for a way out. But there was no easy escape. Not anymore. The man finally stood up, brushing himself off like he was leaving, but not before giving me a smug look. He clearly didn't care about the situation, like it was just another night for him. "I'll just let you two handle this," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he walked past me. I felt a surge of anger, but I didn't act on it. There was no point. My focus was on Sarah now. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, the house fell into a silence that was more suffocating than any argument could have been. We stood there, facing each other. The years of shared experiences, the moments that I thought defined us, they were all gone. The weight of everything I had believed in seemed to evaporate, leaving nothing but cold reality. "Why, Sarah?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you just tell me? If you wanted out, you could have said something." She looked at me, but it wasn't the look of the woman I married. It was cold, detached, like I was just a nuisance to her now. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said finally, but her voice was empty. No apology, no regret, just an excuse. "No, you didn't want to hurt yourself." I shot back, the bitterness leaking through my words. "You didn't want to lose the comfort of the life I built for you. But you've already lost it. You've already lost me." She didn't respond right away. She looked at me like she had seen me 1,000 times but never really looked. And that hurt more than anything. I knew right then there was no saving this. The woman I thought I knew had been gone for a long time. I was just too blind to see it. I couldn't take it anymore. The cold, empty look she was giving me, the dismissive tone in her voice, it was all too much. For a moment, I thought maybe I was dreaming. This couldn't be real. The woman I had built my life with, the one who promised me loyalty, trust, love, she had thrown it all away for some cheap thrill. Sarah had always been so good at playing the part. The caring wife, the loving partner, the woman who would never betray me. She had me believing everything she said. She knew how to manipulate situations, how to make everything seem okay when it wasn't. But now, standing in front of her, hearing her give me excuses, I realized how foolish I had been. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. I was stuck in a nightmare, unable to wake up. The woman I thought I knew was gone. The woman I thought I loved had never been the person I imagined her to be. And the worst part? She didn't seem to care at all. "You know what's funny?" I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You say you didn't want to hurt me, but that's all you've done. You've been lying to me for God knows how long, sneaking around behind my back. And for what? To get some excitement from a guy who isn't even worth your time." Her eyes narrowed as she stepped back, crossing her arms over her chest. She wasn't defensive, though. No, Sarah was too good for that. Instead, she gave me a look, almost like she was trying to remain calm, to hold the upper hand in a situation where she knew she had already lost. "James, you're overreacting," she said dismissively, as if she could brush away the reality of what was happening with a few choice words. "It's not a big deal. It's just something that happened. Something that happened." I repeated, my voice rising. "You think this is just something that happened? You've been sleeping with him behind my back. That's not something that just happens, Sarah. That's a choice. And you made it." Her expression didn't change. She looked almost bored now, like she had heard this all before. Like this was some script she had memorized and was just going through the motions. "We've been distant for a while now," she said flatly. "I didn't feel fulfilled, okay? It's not like I'm some monster." "A monster?" I shot back, unable to believe what I was hearing. "You think this is about being fulfilled? You think I don't feel betrayed, humiliated? You don't think I see what's been happening? Do you even care about me, Sarah? Or was it just easier to make up excuses for why you went to him instead of talking to me?" I could see her trying to hold it together, but the cracks were starting to show. For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but it was quickly masked by her defensive attitude. "You always say that. Talk to you. But what's the point, James? You're so wrapped up in your own little world, so focused on your career and what's going on with you, that I couldn't even talk to you without it turning into a lecture." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't enough that she had been hiding an affair for God knows how long, but now she was trying to flip the blame on me. She was saying that it was my fault she cheated, that I didn't give her enough attention. My blood boiled. "So now I'm the bad guy in this, huh? You're the one who broke our vows, Sarah. You're the one who lied to me. And now you're trying to twist this into something I did wrong? That's pathetic." She didn't respond, and for a moment, the silence between us was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, each second feeling like it stretched into eternity. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, anything, to make this real, to make her understand the depth of what she had done. But I didn't. I just stood there, numb, staring at the woman I once thought I knew, the woman I had built a life with, the mother of my children. And now she was nothing more than a stranger. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said again. But this time, there was no conviction in her voice. It was empty, just a way to make her feel better. "I never meant for this to happen. It just did." "No," I said, my voice low and cold. "You wanted it. You wanted him. You chose him. And now you're trying to pretend like it was some accident? Like you had no control over your actions? That's not how this works, Sarah." I could see her face soften for a moment, the mask she wore cracking just enough to reveal a hint of vulnerability. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to make me feel sorry for her. It wasn't enough to make me want to forgive her. The damage was done. The lies had been exposed. And no amount of apologies or excuses would ever make it okay again. "You think it was easy for me?" she whispered, but there was no real emotion behind the words. "You think I wanted to hurt you? I didn't want to hurt you, but I didn't know what else to do. I needed something more, something that I wasn't getting from you anymore." It was as if she was trying to justify it, as if all the pain I was feeling could somehow be soothed by her words. But I wasn't listening. I wasn't hearing it anymore. Everything she said felt empty, meaningless. I was done. "That's it, Sarah," I said, my voice finally breaking through the numbness. "You made your choice. You betrayed me, and now you'll have to live with it. But I'm done. I'm done with this, with you. I don't even know who you are anymore." She didn't say anything in response. She just stood there, staring at me with those eyes that I had once thought were filled with love. But now they were empty. Nothing was left. I turned and walked out of the room, the door slamming behind me, signaling the end of everything. It wasn't until I reached the front door that I realized I had no idea where I was going. My mind was still reeling from the confrontation, but I couldn't stay in that house. Not with her in there. Not with the lies, the betrayal, and the coldness hanging over everything. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe I was looking for something familiar, something that made sense. But everything I thought I knew was a lie. Every moment, every memory felt tainted. I had no idea who the woman I'd been living with for the past few years really was. She was a stranger now, A stranger who had thrown away everything for an affair that meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. And I was left to pick up the pieces of shattered life. I found myself walking aimlessly down the street, my feet carrying me further and further from the house. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to face Sarah again, to hear her excuses, to see the fake remorse in her eyes that was as hollow as the words she had said. I needed to get away, to think, to process what had just happened. But nothing made sense. Nothing felt right. It was like the world around me had shifted, and I had no place in it anymore. As I walked, I felt a strange mix of numbness and anger. The rage inside me was still there, burning just beneath the surface. But at the same time, I felt detached, like I was watching everything unfold from a distance. My mind kept going back to the moment I had overheard Sarah talking on the phone, telling someone how she had settled for less by being with me. How had I not seen it? How had I not recognized the signs? All the late nights, the sudden disinterest, the secretive behavior. How had I missed it? But there was no time for self-pity, no time to dwell on the past. The truth was out now, and I couldn't undo it. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine when it wasn't. I had to face it, had to figure out what to do next. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen, seeing a couple of missed calls from friends and family. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to answer questions, hear the sympathy, or explain what had happened. It was none of their business. I needed space. I stopped at a park bench, sitting down and letting the cool air wash over me. The streetlights flickered in the distance, and for the first time in what felt like years, I was alone with my thoughts. The noise of the world around me seemed distant, muffled by the weight of everything that had just happened. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah, the way she had looked at me during our confrontation, the coldness in her eyes, the way she refused to take responsibility for her actions. She had tried to make it sound like I was the one at fault, like I had driven her to cheat on me. I laughed bitterly. I'm the one at fault? For years, I had been the one holding everything together. I had been the one working hard, providing, and making sure everything was in place. But none of that mattered to her. None of it mattered when she found someone else to fill the void she claimed I had created. The truth was, she had checked out long before I had realized it. And now, she was going to have to deal with the consequences of her choices. She didn't get to walk away from this without facing what she had done. I took a deep breath and wiped my face with my hands. It felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. But I couldn't stay here. I couldn't let myself be consumed by this. I had to do something. I pulled myself up from the bench and started walking again. My feet moved faster now, the anger in me pushing me forward. I didn't know where I was going, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going back to the house, not yet. I couldn't face Sarah again, not after everything that had been said. Not after the way she had looked at me like I was the one who was crazy. I pulled out my phone again and texted a friend, someone who didn't know about Sarah's affair, someone who hadn't been part of the lies. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge, who wouldn't tell me I had to forgive her. I needed someone to listen. And at that moment, my mind was set on one thing. I wasn't going back. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew this was the end. The end of the life I had with Sarah. The end of pretending. The end of all the lies. I couldn't live like that anymore. I didn't want to go back to the woman who had betrayed me. I didn't want to hear the excuses, the hollow apologies. She could keep pretending that everything was fine, but I knew better now. I wasn't going to be her fool anymore. So I kept walking, step by step, further and further away from the life I had once known. The days following the confrontation passed in a blur. It felt like I was floating through life, detached from everything around me, unsure of where I was headed. I had left the house that night, walked aimlessly through the streets until I had no idea where I was. I barely slept, barely ate. My mind kept returning to the same thoughts. Sarah's cold words, the way she had dismissed everything I had done for her, for us. I couldn't get the image of her laughing with him out of my head. It was a cruel mockery of everything I had believed in. I couldn't stop thinking about the affair, about the lies, about the way she had looked at me when I confronted her, as if she didn't care. But the worst part was how easy it had all been for her. How quickly she had turned her back on everything we built. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the fact that she had been so willing to throw it all away without a second thought. The years we had spent together, the memories we had made, they meant nothing to her. I had meant nothing to her. I had always believed that if you loved someone, if you truly cared about them, you didn't do this. You didn't cheat. You didn't betray them like that. But Sarah had made her choice. She had chosen him, and now I had to choose myself. I hadn't gone back to the house since that night. The thought of facing her again made my stomach turn. I didn't know what I would say. I didn't know if there were any words left between us. The silence in that house was deafening now. Everything had changed, and I couldn't keep pretending like it hadn't. A few days later, I found myself sitting in my car outside the house, staring at it. I had come here to make a decision about the rest of my life. I knew I couldn't stay in this marriage. I couldn't keep living a lie, but I also didn't know what to do next. Divorce? Leave her without any warning? Go back inside and confront her again? Nothing felt right. I had spent the last few days processing everything, trying to make sense of the chaos Sarah had brought into my life. I had always thought our relationship was solid. We had been through so much together, good times, bad times, everything in between. And now, it felt like it had all been a facade. I took a deep breath, my fingers gripping the steering wheel. There was a part of me that wanted to walk away from it all, to leave Sarah behind and never look back. But I wasn't that kind of person. I had spent years trying to make this work. I had given everything I had to this marriage, to her. I couldn't just walk away without a fight. But what was the point? What was the point of fighting for something that was already broken? Sarah had made her decision. She had chosen him, and there was nothing I could do to change that. The only thing left for me was to decide what I wanted from this point forward. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. A lawyer. I hadn't contacted one yet, but I knew I needed to. I needed to know what my options were. I needed to protect myself. The thought of a divorce made my stomach twist, but I knew it was inevitable. There was no coming back from what Sarah had done. The lawyer picked up on the second ring. I explained the situation in as few words as possible, not wanting to get into too much detail. I didn't need to. It was clear what had happened. She had cheated, and I had to make a choice. He gave me some basic advice and set up an appointment for later that week. I hung up, the weight of the decision sinking in. I sat in my car for a few more minutes, just trying to gather my thoughts. The next steps were clear. I would get a lawyer, start the process, and move on. But that didn't make it any easier. It didn't erase the hurt, the anger, the betrayal that had taken root in my chest. Eventually, I got out of the car and walked up to the front door. It felt strange, like I was walking into someone else's life. I hadn't been here in days, and now, every step I took felt like I was walking away from everything I had known. I didn't know if I would ever walk through that door again. I opened the door, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. The house was empty, just like it had been when I had left. There were no signs of Sarah, no evidence of her presence. It was as if she had disappeared completely. But I knew she hadn't. She was just hiding, just waiting for me to make my move. I walked through the house, not sure where to go, not sure what I was even looking for. But then I stopped in front of our bedroom, the room where we had spent so many nights together, the room that had once felt like a sanctuary. Now it felt like a prison. I opened the door and stepped inside. Everything was just as it had been when I left, except now it felt cold. I couldn't stay here any longer. This place, these memories, they were all tied to a version of my life that no longer existed. I was done. I was done with the lies. I was done with Sarah. I turned around and walked out of the room, out of the house, and back into the world that had suddenly become so foreign to me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to keep moving. There was no turning back. There was nothing left for me here. I spent the next few days in a haze. My mind refused to settle, always drifting back to the same place. Sarah, I couldn't escape her. Her lies, her betrayal, they were all etched in my mind, over and over again like a bad film reel stuck on loop. I had tried to move on, tried to focus on the practical steps of divorce, but it was hard to look past the emotional devastation that came with it. The marriage I had worked so hard to maintain, to protect, had turned into a nightmare. I hadn't heard from Sarah since that night. I hadn't called her, and she hadn't reached out to me. It was clear that the silence between us was a reflection of the distance that had grown in our relationship. But in a strange way, that silence was the loudest thing I'd ever experienced. It was deafening. I spent my time sorting through the remnants of my life. I started packing up my things, sorting through the house, trying to make sense of everything. But nothing felt right anymore. Nothing made sense. The pictures on the wall, the memories that were supposed to bring comfort, now felt like reminders of a life that had been stolen from me. I had spent years trying to build something with Sarah, something that would last. But now, everything we had shared felt like it had been turned to dust. The thought of her with him, the man she had chosen over me, kept playing on my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing with him, talking to him the way she used to talk to me. She had been so quick to move on, so eager to throw me away. And I couldn't help but wonder how much of it had been planned. How long had she been seeing him? How long had she been lying to me? Had I ever truly known her? Or had I just been a fool, clinging to an illusion of love? The anger started to bubble up again. It was like a wave, crashing over me in surges, until it consumed me completely. But this time it wasn't just anger. It was a deep, gut-wrenching sadness, the kind that made you question everything you believed in. The betrayal was deep, and the hurt went further than I had expected. It wasn't just about the affair, it was about everything she had taken from me. My trust, my sense of self-worth, my dignity. She had shattered all of it, and now I was left to pick up the pieces. I had spent so many years trying to make her happy, trying to be the man she wanted me to be. But in the end, none of it mattered. She had gone to him, and now I was left with nothing but the aftermath of a relationship that had been built on lies. I couldn't stay here any longer. The house, the memories, it was too much. I needed to escape. I needed to leave everything behind and start fresh. But even as I thought about it, I realized that it wasn't going to be that easy. The scars of this betrayal would follow me, no matter where I went. I could run, but I couldn't outrun the damage she had caused. It was like a dark cloud that would always hang over me. I packed a bag, grabbed what I needed, and walked out of the house. It felt strange, almost surreal, like I was walking out of a dream I had no control over. I knew what I had to do, but it didn't make it any easier. I got in my car, not sure where I was going, just needing to get away from everything. I didn't even know what I was searching for. Peace? Closure? I wasn't sure, but I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I couldn't keep reliving the pain, the betrayal, every time I walked through those doors. I drove aimlessly for hours, the road stretching out before me like a never-ending expanse. It was as if I was searching for something, anything, to fill the emptiness inside. But there was nothing. The car felt like a prison, the walls closing in on me, the silence louder than anything else. Every turn, every streetlight, every mile felt like a reminder of everything I'd lost. I pulled over to the side of the road and sat there, staring out at the horizon. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the silence. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to hear from Sarah. I didn't want to hear her excuses, her apologies, her attempts to justify what she had done. But the buzz kept going, insistent, until I finally gave in and pulled the phone from my pocket. It was a text from her. "Can we talk? I need to explain." My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. There was no explanation that could make any of this okay. What had been said, what had been done, couldn't be undone with a simple text message. I put the phone down, feeling the weight of her words pressing on me. Part of me wanted to respond, to let her explain, to somehow fix this. But I knew better. There was no fixing this. It was broken beyond repair. And no amount of apologies or explanations would change the fact that she had chosen him over me. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and drove off again. The road seemed to go on forever, and I didn't know where it was taking me. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to the life I had before. Not after this. I couldn't go back to her. I couldn't go back to the lies. The only thing left for me now was to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it was. I didn't know where the road would lead, but I knew I couldn't stay in the past. And so I kept driving. The days passed slowly, the silence in my head growing louder with each step I took further away from everything I'd known. I didn't return to the house. I didn't want to. The longer I stayed away, the more the weight of what Sarah had done lifted off my shoulders. But there was still a lingering ache in the pit of my stomach. The emptiness inside me was palpable. It wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about the life I thought I had, the trust one had placed in her, and the future I had envisioned for us. Now it was all gone. All of it. Reduced to nothing but a cruel joke. I had moved into a small apartment in the city. It was far from the life I had shared with Sarah. The place was bare, just the basics, some furniture, a few pictures on the walls, a bed to sleep in. It felt temporary, but that was the point. I wasn't planning to stay here forever. I was just trying to survive, trying to find some semblance of normalcy after the chaos of the past few weeks. The first few nights in the apartment were the hardest. I found myself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind would race, replaying everything that had happened from the moment I first overheard Sarah's phone call to the final confrontation. Each memory was like a wound that refused to heal. And yet, as painful as it was, there was a strange sense of relief. At least I wasn't with her anymore. At least I wasn't living the lie. I tried to keep busy. I spent my days working, keeping my mind occupied with the mundane tasks of life. But no matter how much I threw myself into work, there was always that nagging voice in the back of my mind, reminding me of what I had lost. I would see couples walking down the street, laughing, holding hands, and I would wonder if I would ever be able to feel that again. Could I ever trust someone like I trusted Sarah? Could I ever open myself up to someone else after what she had done? I didn't have the answers. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I ever would. It had been a week since I last heard from Sarah. The text she sent me asking to talk had remained unanswered. I knew what she wanted, an explanation, an apology, a chance to make things right. But there was no making it right. Not this time. I had nothing left to give. She had drained me emotionally, mentally, and physically. And now, I was just trying to pick up the pieces of who I was before I met her. But despite everything, there were moments when I found myself thinking about her, about what we had shared, about the good times, the way she used to make me laugh, the way she used to look at me with love in her eyes. Those memories, though bittersweet, were a part of me. I couldn't deny that. And as much as I wanted to hate her, as much as I wanted to scream at her for what she did, I couldn't erase the history we had. I found myself missing her in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't about the affair anymore. It was about the years we had spent together, the life we had built. It was about the fact that she had once been my best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone. And now, she was the person who had shattered that trust. I thought about reaching out to her. I thought about calling her, asking her to explain herself, to apologize for everything she had done. But I knew it wouldn't help. I knew that even if she apologized, it wouldn't change what had happened. She had made her choice, and I had to make mine. I needed closure, not from her, but from myself. So I took a walk one evening, the air crisp and cool, the streets of the city bustling with life. I had been avoiding this place, this area where we used to go together, our favorite cafe, the park where we would sit for hours talking about everything and nothing at all. But tonight I was ready. I had to face it. I had to let go of the memories that had been holding me captive for so long. I walked past the cafe where we used to sit. It was still there, the same place, the same atmosphere. But everything had changed. The world around me felt different now. I could still picture us sitting there, laughing over coffee, talking about our plans for the future. The future I had thought would be with her. The future that had now been ripped away in an instant. But I couldn't keep dwelling on the past. I had to move forward. I had to find a way to heal, to rebuild my life, to find peace in the aftermath of the storm. I continued walking, my thoughts drifting in and out of focus. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't keep running from everything. I had to face it, confront it, and move forward. There was no going back. There was no changing the past. But there was still time to change my future. As I walked, I thought about the future, about what I wanted. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay in this place forever. I had to rebuild. I had to find something that would bring me joy again, something that would help me heal from the pain Sarah had caused. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew this. I was going to be okay. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define who I was. I was stronger than that. I had been through hell, and I had survived. And now, I was going to move forward. The road ahead was uncertain, but I wasn't afraid anymore. The weeks following the confrontation with Sarah passed with a strange combination of emptiness and relief. Each day felt like a battle, not with her, but with myself. Every corner of the city seemed to trigger a memory of the life I had shared with her. Our favorite places, our inside jokes, the plans we had made for the future. All of that had been shattered in an instant. But with every passing day, the pain started to dull. Slowly, I found myself functioning again. My heart wasn't as heavy, my mind wasn't as clouded, and I was finally starting to breathe without feeling suffocated by the past. I had been avoiding talking to anyone about what happened. My friends, my family, they all knew something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want them to feel sorry for me. It was my burden to carry, my heartbreak to sort through. But even though I had distanced myself from everyone, there were still moments when I longed for the support I knew I needed. I had become accustomed to being strong, to handling everything on my own. But this was different. This was something I couldn't handle alone. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, I picked up my phone and texted my best friend, David. He was the one person who had always been there for me. The one person I knew wouldn't judge me, wouldn't lecture me. He would just listen. And that was exactly what I needed. Can we talk? I'm a mess. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with his reply. Of course. Where are you? I'll come by. It wasn't long before he showed up at my door. He didn't need to ask questions or pry. He just walked in, sat down beside me, and waited. It felt strange, this sudden rush of vulnerability. I hadn't allowed myself to be this open with anyone in so long. But David didn't push me. He just let me speak when I was ready. After a long silence, I finally spoke. The words came out in a rush, like they had been building up inside me for weeks. David, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm so angry and so sad, and I don't know how to fix any of this. She betrayed me. She made me believe in something that wasn't real. And now, I don't even know who I am anymore. David listened intently, his expression sympathetic but calm. You don't have to fix it right away, James, he said softly. What you're going through, it's painful, but you don't have to have all the answers. The only thing you can do right now is take care of yourself. Everything else will come in time. I shook my head, frustration building. But how do I move on from this? How do I trust again? How do I even look at someone else the way I looked at her? How do I pick up the pieces of everything she took from me? David took a deep breath. You don't have to do it all at once. It's going to take time, man. It's going to hurt. But what matters is that you're still here. You're still standing. And that's what you have to focus on now. One step at a time. His words weren't a magic fix. They didn't make the pain disappear. But they gave me something I hadn't had in weeks. Perspective. I didn't have to have all the answers. I didn't have to know exactly what my life would look like after this. I just had to take it one day at a time. Over the next few weeks, I focused on healing. I stayed away from Sarah. I didn't respond to her attempts to reach out. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. I wasn't going to let her back into my life. Not now. Not ever. I found myself going to therapy for the first time in my life. I had always thought I could handle my problems on my own, but this was different. This was a wound that needed more than just time to heal. It needed understanding, clarity, and a way to process everything that had happened. Talking to someone outside of my circle helped. It gave me a sense of release, a way to articulate my pain without fearing judgment. It wasn't easy. Some days, I felt like I was taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But I kept going. Slowly, I began to find myself again. I started to reconnect with the things I had loved before Sarah entered my life. The hobbies I had abandoned, the friendships I had neglected, the dreams I had put on hold. The process wasn't quick, and it wasn't without pain, but it was progress. I was healing. It wasn't long before I found myself standing in front of a mirror one evening, looking at a man I hardly recognized. Not because I had changed physically, but because I had changed emotionally. I had endured something most people never experienced. And while I was scarred, I was also stronger. The man I saw in the reflection wasn't a broken man anymore. He wasn't the man Sarah had made him out to be. He was a man who had been through hell, but who had come out on the other side, more aware of who he was and what he wanted. I had learned so much from this experience. I had learned that trust, once broken, was incredibly difficult to rebuild. I had learned that I could survive betrayal, but that didn't mean I had to accept it. I had learned that love, real love, wasn't about settling or making excuses. It was about mutual respect, honesty, and understanding. And most importantly, I had learned that I was enough. I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. I didn't need Sarah's approval to feel complete. And for the first time in months, I finally felt at peace. The anger that had consumed me for so long was starting to fade. The sadness was still there, but it didn't control me anymore. I wasn't going to let this experience define me. I was going to define myself. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready for it.